A long time ago in the ancient land of Israel, a young shepherd boy named David lived a simple life. He spent his days tending his father's sheep in the fields near Bethlehem. David was the youngest of 8 sons, and while his older brothers were out fighting in the army of King Saul, David stayed home, responsible for the flock. David was not just any shepherd. He was a skilled musician, playing the harp beautifully. His music was so soothing that it brought comfort and joy to those who heard it. More importantly, David had a deep and unwavering faith in God. He believed that God was always with him, protecting him from danger. One day, while David was watching over the sheep, a lion and a bear came to attack the flock, trying to steal a lamb. Without hesitation, David ran towards the wild animals, bravely confronting them. With God's help, David killed both the lion and the bear, saving the sheep from certain death. This act of courage showed David's strength and his trust in God's protection. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom, King Saul was facing a great problem. The Philistines, Israel's enemies, had gathered their army for war. Among them was a giant of a man named Goliath, who was from the city of Gath. Goliath was over 9 feet tall and wore heavy armor. He came out every day, challenging the Israelites to send someone to fight him. Goliath shouted insults at the Israelite army and their God, terrifying them all. King Saul and his soldiers were afraid to fight Goliath. No one dared to accept his challenge. Day after day, Goliath continued his taunts, and the Israelite army remained paralyzed by fear. One day, David's father, Jesse, sent him to the Israelite camp to bring food to his older brothers. When David arrived, he heard Goliath's challenge and saw the fear in the faces of the soldiers. David was shocked that no one had stood up to defend Israel and honor God. David asked the soldiers, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" His words caught the attention of some of the soldiers, who told King Saul about David's courage. King Saul summoned David to his tent. He looked at the young shepherd boy and said, "You are only a youth, and he has been a warrior from his youth. You cannot go and fight against this Philistine." But David was not intimidated. He told King Saul about his experiences protecting his father's sheep from the lion and the bear. David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." King Saul was amazed by David's faith and courage. He realized that David truly believed that God would help him. Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Saul tried to give David his armor to wear, but David found it too heavy and cumbersome. He was not used to wearing armor. Instead, David took his shepherd's staff, his sling, and 5 smooth stones from a nearby stream. He went out to meet Goliath with nothing but his faith and these simple tools. When Goliath saw David, he was filled with contempt. He saw only a young boy, unarmed and inexperienced. Goliath roared, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" He cursed David by his gods and threatened to feed his flesh to the birds and the wild animals. David was not afraid. He replied to Goliath, "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." David continued, "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." David ran towards Goliath. He reached into his bag, took out a stone, placed it in his sling, and swung it around his head. With great accuracy and force, David released the stone. It flew through the air and struck Goliath in the forehead. The stone sank into Goliath's forehead, and the giant crashed to the ground, face down. David had defeated Goliath with a single stone and the power of God. The Philistines, seeing their champion fall, turned and fled in terror. The Israelites, who had been paralyzed by fear, now rose up and pursued the Philistines, routing them from the battlefield. David's victory was a great triumph for Israel. After the victory, David became a hero in Israel. He was praised and celebrated for his courage and faith. King Saul took David into his service and made him a commander in his army. David continued to be successful in battle, and his popularity grew. However, Saul became jealous of David's success and popularity. He feared that David would become more powerful than him and eventually take his throne. Saul's jealousy turned into hatred, and he began to plot against David's life. Saul made several attempts to kill David, but each time David escaped. Some of Saul's own family, like his son Jonathan and his daughter Michal, loved David and helped him to avoid Saul's traps. Jonathan and David became close friends, promising to always be loyal to each other. David was forced to flee from Saul and live as a fugitive, hiding in caves and the wilderness. Even though Saul hunted him relentlessly, David remained loyal to Saul as the king of Israel. David refused to raise his hand against God's anointed king. During his time as a fugitive, David gathered a band of loyal followers. These men were outcasts, debtors, and those who were discontented. David became their leader, and they protected him and helped him survive in the wilderness. One day, Saul and his army were pursuing David when they stopped to rest in a cave. Unbeknownst to Saul, David and his men were hiding in the back of the same cave. David's men urged him to kill Saul, saying that God had given him the opportunity to get rid of his enemy. But David refused. He said, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to stretch out my hand against him, seeing he is the Lord's anointed." David only cut off a piece of Saul's robe, showing that he had been close enough to kill Saul but chose not to. When Saul left the cave, David went out and called to him. He showed Saul the piece of his robe and said, "See, my father, see the corner of your robe in my hand. For in that I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you. Know and see that there is no wrong or treason in my hand. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it." Saul was moved by David's loyalty and remorseful for his actions. He acknowledged that David was more righteous than him. However, Saul's repentance was short-lived, and he continued to pursue David. After years of hiding and running from Saul, David finally had the opportunity to return to his own land. The Philistines attacked Israel again, and Saul and his sons were killed in battle. When David heard the news of Saul's death, he mourned deeply. He wrote a lament, a song of sorrow for Saul and Jonathan, expressing his grief and admiration for them. With Saul dead, the people of Judah anointed David as their king. However, the rest of Israel followed Saul's son, Ishbosheth. For several years, there was a civil war between the followers of David and the followers of Ishbosheth. Eventually, Ishbosheth was assassinated, and the elders of Israel came to David and anointed him as king over all of Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 40 years. As king, David united the kingdom of Israel and Judah, making Jerusalem his capital city. He led Israel in many successful battles, expanding the kingdom's territory and defeating its enemies. David was not only a great warrior and king, but he was also a man of God. He loved God with all his heart, and he sought to obey God's commands. David wrote many of the Psalms, beautiful poems and songs of praise and worship to God. However, David was not perfect. He made mistakes and committed sins. One of the most significant sins was when he committed adultery with Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. David then arranged for Uriah to be killed in battle to cover up his sin. God sent the prophet Nathan to confront David about his sin. Nathan told David a story about a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb. David was outraged by the story and declared that the rich man should be punished. Nathan then said to David, "You are the man." He revealed that David's actions were similar to the rich man's, and that David had sinned greatly against God. David was deeply convicted of his sin. He confessed his guilt to God and asked for forgiveness. God forgave David, but he also brought consequences for his sin. David's son, born from his relationship with Bathsheba, died. Despite his sins, David remained a man after God's own heart. He continued to trust in God and to seek his forgiveness and guidance. David's life is a complex and inspiring story of a shepherd boy who became a king, a warrior, a poet, and a man who loved God deeply, even in the face of his own failings. His story continues to inspire people today. David's reign was not without its shadows. Power, as it often does, tested the depths of his character. The allure of the throne, the weight of responsibility, and the temptations that came with being king created a crucible in which his faith and moral compass were continually challenged. One of the most significant tests came in the form of his adulterous affair with Bathsheba and the subsequent murder of her husband, Uriah the Hittite. This episode, recounted in 2 Samuel 11, stands as a stark reminder that even the most devout are capable of profound moral failings. David, blinded by his desires, orchestrated Uriah's death in battle, abusing his power to cover up his sin. This act had far-reaching consequences, not only for David personally, but also for his kingdom. The prophet Nathan confronted David with his sin, using a parable to illustrate the injustice he had committed. David, initially filled with righteous indignation at the imagined crime, was devastated when Nathan revealed, "You are the man." 2 Samuel 12:7. David's response to Nathan's rebuke is a testament to his character. He did not try to justify his actions or deny his guilt. Instead, he confessed his sin and pleaded for God's mercy. Psalm 51, often attributed to David, is a powerful expression of his remorse and his longing for forgiveness. "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love," he wrote. "Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin." God forgave David, but the consequences of his sin lingered. As Nathan prophesied, "The sword will never depart from your house." 2 Samuel 12:10. David's family life became fraught with conflict and tragedy. His son Amnon raped his half-sister Tamar, and Absalom, Tamar's full brother, murdered Amnon in revenge. Absalom later led a rebellion against David, plunging the kingdom into civil war. These events weighed heavily on David. He mourned the loss of his sons and the division within his kingdom. Yet, even in the midst of these trials, he remained steadfast in his faith. He sought God's guidance and trusted in his providence. David's reign also saw the consolidation of Israel's power and the expansion of its territory. He defeated the Philistines, the Moabites, the Edomites, and the Ammonites, establishing Israel as a dominant force in the region. He brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, making it the religious and political center of the kingdom. David also had a deep desire to build a temple for the Lord. However, God told him that he was a man of war and that his son Solomon would be the one to build the temple. Nevertheless, David prepared extensively for the construction of the temple, gathering materials and organizing the workforce. In his later years, David faced further challenges, including a census that was seen as an act of pride and resulted in a plague that swept through the land. He also had to contend with rivalries among his sons as they vied for the throne. Despite his flaws and failings, David remained a beloved king and a man after God's own heart. He was a skilled warrior, a gifted musician, and a passionate worshiper. He wrote many of the Psalms, which continue to inspire and comfort people around the world. As David approached the end of his life, he designated his son Solomon as his successor. He charged Solomon to be faithful to God and to build the temple that he had longed to construct. David died at the age of 70, after reigning for 40 years. David's legacy is complex and multifaceted. He was a flawed human being who made mistakes, sometimes grievous ones. But he was also a man of great faith, courage, and devotion. His story reminds us that even imperfect people can be used by God to accomplish great things. David's life, with all its triumphs and tragedies, serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of repentance, forgiveness, and unwavering faith in the face of adversity. His impact on Israelite history and the enduring power of his Psalms continue to resonate today, solidifying his place as one of the most significant figures in the Old Testament.